Hello, everybody. This is Romantic, your Modding 101 teacher. We are recording right now this version of the hair porting because during the class we had a few hiccups. So I'm recording this now for everyone who missed the class and everyone who attended the class but want to go through the steps again. I'm going to simplify this as much as I can, but if you need to go back and rewind as many times as you need to it should all be visible anyway. So, uh, what we're going to cover here is going to be specifically how to grab a hair that has already been um, made compatible with the game, right? So it has to already be installed, it has to already be visible in the game if you install it. But the difference is you want to move it from a specific gender to another or from one race to another. I specify this because you might think like, oh, if I want a hair from Nier Automata or maybe a hair from Nikki or any other type of game and you want hair from that, that's a different process. It has many other additional steps, and I don't recommend I don't recommend doing that as like a first interaction with porting because it's going to be extremely complicated. So we're doing basically the most basic of basics. Uh, we are this first video is not going to cover weights. Weights and skeletons is going to be its own thing. However, I'm going to give you some pointers for this as we go along. So hopefully, when I make another either give a class or make another video explaining all of this, you can actually sit down and look through everything that you have and compare notes. So for this, we're going to need text tools and we're going to need a Blender. Ideally, a version that is more or less recent, like around 3.0 or something, just because things sometimes may differ and I cannot tell you like, oh, this version is different from mine. I wouldn't be able to tell you. So the closest it is to 3.0, the better. The difference shouldn't be too big though. All right. So, uh, when you first start, you want to obviously import your hair. Ideally, you're more or less familiar with textiles already. This is not something that you can do in Penumbra at the moment. So make sure that you have your textiles already set up, but that you more or less know where to find things by fooling around with the categories. Almost everything that you're going to need is going to be in the character section. And keep in mind also that um, if you are going to pick up modding as a hobby, I would recommend that you make a copy of your game and that you use that copy of the game with Textools. Or I should say that you use Textools with that copy of the game because Textools is a very invasive program. It's going to mess with your files directly, and that many times ends up in Textools like crashing and corrupting your files. And while some fixes might like work, like with the launcher has some options for trying to fix corrupted files, it is not a guarantee, and sometimes it means that you have to like install the game all over again. So keep that in mind. Um, never run Textiles at the same time as you are running Penumbra. I would recommend that when you're finished with Textiles, that you completely um, start over. Like you go here to like help and start over and basically erase everything that you did because you don't want mods running in Textiles and in Penumbra at the same time. All right, that with that out of the way, once you have imported your hair, which I hate that it says import. We should just say install, right? You have installed your hair. Look for it. This one I installed in the Midlander female. And then here in the, not in the textures, but in the models, go look for the number that you want, which for me is the 172. Um, we are going to look into the textures as well, but that's going to be a little bit later. First, what we want to do is to export everything that we need into and bring it into Blender. So we are going to come here to the export button, but don't actually click export. Click the little drop down and tell it that you want to export it as FBX. So you click that, and it's going to take a couple seconds to do it. The easiest way to find your files, if you're not familiar where everything that TextTools is doing gets saved, you can just go and click this little folder icon over here, and it's going to bring you your, this is your FBX, and everything else is the files that the FBX is going to be using for textures. So actually, this gives you a little peek if you, for later, like if you want to know what the textures of this hair look like, you have an idea here. This is one texture and this is the other. This hair has two in particular. But the important thing is that here is my file, and if I want to access it very quickly, I can just click here the address, copy it, and um, now that I copy it, I can go into Blender. When you open Blender, you're going to see that you have a collection, a camera, a cube, and a light. This is useful for people who are actually going to be doing 3D modeling and rendering and stuff like that. 90% of the time, if you're doing anything Final Fantasy related, you're not going to need it. So you can just get rid of all of it, just select it and delete it. Also here you can see my mouse. If you, I am using a screen capture tool, so everything that I do with my mouse, you're going to be able to see. This is the scroll wheel in the middle, and here are like the different keys that I am pressing are going to be saved. So if you're not sure what I just did, it's going to show up there. All right. Ideally, before you start this, you are more or less already familiar with Blender. If not, you are going to have a hard time finding specific things. So please remember to look through our guides for Blender basics before you dive into this, just so you make your life a little easier, because it's difficult to familiarize yourself with a with a new program at the same time that you are learning to do something in it. You probably want to have an idea of how to move around and what the different menus over here usually do and things like that. So please do that. Now I'm going to import my hair, going to File, Import, and make sure that you do it as FBX. I'm going to then go here and paste the address of where my hair is, and I'm going to bring it here. All right, so by pressing the dot or the period in the numpad, I can get a little closer, but not as close as I want, so I'm going to just move around with my mouse. And you can see that the hair is right now in solid mode, which can be selected over here. This is for the viewport. So I don't currently want the solid mode. I would like to look at the hair properly. So I'm going to select the material preview mode. Now, Blender tends to default the material preview mode as always the alpha blend, which makes things transparent for almost anything that you export, at least when it comes to text tools. So in order to make everything not translucent, you need to go here to the material properties. But first, let's look at what materials we have. Um, this little Y over here, this is what our object is going to be including. I would always try to name them as soon as I import them, just so I don't get lost if I end up adding a lot of, um, different meshes. So I open it. It's going to have two groups over here. Do not touch this. Do not mess with them. Not They are not something you need to worry about. You can just ignore them. But the things that you want are always going to be under the en root, which is basically your skeleton. So everything that is connected to your skeleton is going to be there, and they are these meshes over here. You can see that when I select one, it lights up in yellow, telling me exactly what mesh it is. So uh, something that we're going to be looking into later is that materials for text tools are assigned with these numbers here. So if you have a zero point 0.0, that is one type of material. If you have zero point 0.1, it's the same material, but it's just a different part of a different mesh. So all of the 0 point x share one specific material. All of the 1 point x meshes share a different material. So in this case, we can um, confirm what I had already seen in my documents, that this has two materials, material A and material B. Your hair might have more parts, might have 2.0 and 3.0. The maximum number of materials that you can have in textiles is 4. So um, make sure that you select each of the material ones. So I go first to 0.0, and I select material properties, which is this little red uh, semicircle here. Well, this red circle here. I close the surface, and in settings, I have the blend mode as alpha blend, which I don't want. I'll change it to alpha clip. So now all of the meshes that have the 0 point x um, numbers now are going to be visible, and I can work with them a lot easier. My material 1.0 also needs to be assign alpha clip, but it's not going to be a big problem for me because it's just these little butterfly accessories over here. So they're not very visible, they don't matter that much. But for you, it's probably going to be more hair, and you want it to be visible. So make sure that every number and the 0 point x, the 1 point x, and the 2 point x, at least one of them you change to alpha clip, and then the rest of the materials will change once you do that. All right, so another thing that we want to do so we can work better with this is that we get rid of, well, not get rid of, but we make the bones invisible. These are the bones of the hair. This is telling you how the hair moves. And they usually just get in the way while you are working on refitting stuff. So it's better to just go to the overlays here. And then in objects, we're going to uncheck the bones. So with that, at least we remove it, we get it out of the way, and we can work a little easier. Now, this hair right now is, I pulled it from the Midlander female, which means that it's at the height of a Midlander female. In order to correctly port to a race that you want or a gender that you want, you also need to pull the head, which is in the face section of text tools. So in this case, I'm going to port to a Viera male, and it doesn't matter which of the four main faces you choose because all of the skulls are going to look the same. So just choose one of them and do the same thing of hitting export and FBX. Once you do that, you can repeat the same process of you open your folder, you steal the address, and then when you want to import, you can just copy it here again and bring the face that you want. Now, you're going to be faced with, pardon the pun, a horrible nightmare. Usually, remember that this phase is just for reference for us. It's not going to affect anything. But if you just don't want to look at the horrible nightmare, I would recommend clicking like the main head and doing the same thing that we did, which is go to the material properties and changing it to alpha clip. So not everything is going to be fully solid, but at least the important thing that we're going to be using, which is the head, is going to be always visible and easy to work with. Now, you can just start working like this, but I would recommend that if you are, for example, working with Viera, you might want to also export their ears, which are right on there. After hair, tail, you have ears. You want to export the ears of the Viera for male or female, um, because that way you can see where the ears always start, and that way you will prevent having floating ears. I have already exported this earlier, so I can just copy my address here and bring it to my document in Blender. Uh, Oops, couldn't open. Sorry. Um, so once you bring your face and your ears, it will be a little different depending on what race you're going to be working with. I am not going to be doing everything that we're going to do right now can be applied to Mikote as long as you are not expecting to bring in the vanilla ears. If you want the vanilla ears, you will have to do some extra steps that we can look into in a different video. But right now I'm going to focus on the idea of I have custom ears for my Mikote, so this is what I need to do, right? So I once you have your hair, you have to keep in mind that this um, this location where the head is exactly where the model sits in the game. So you do not want to touch the head. You do not want to touch the ears. Never like fool around with them. I'm going to name my ears, and I'm going to name my face, and I'm going to keep them closed. I am never going to touch anything that is in these categories, in these hierarchies. So I'm going to now move to hair, and you can see that actually I have exact copies for this particular hair. I have exact copies of the hair, like zero point 0.0 is exactly the same version as zero point 0.1, and zero point 0.2 is exactly the same version as zero point 0.3, with some like slight differences that are hard to tell. And the same goes for my little butterflies, like they are just a perfect copy of each other. This is because a lot of modders require to make their own back faces manually like this. So this might not be the case for you. If your hair doesn't have identical copies, you can just ignore this part. But basically, if you have identical copies, you have two options. You can either make sure that you have selected everything every single time that you're working, which can be a little tricky, and sometimes you might accidentally like not like accidentally uh, select just one and work only on one, and then your hair is not going to be exactly the same as the one that you have with it. So What I do when this type of stuff happens is that I get rid of one of the meshes. Um, this is because, and I'll show you very quickly, if you want to know why this is important, in Blender it's not going to be visible, but in the game it's going to be. Um, I'm going to show you here. When I go into solid mode and I open here the viewport shading, in the viewport shading I select backface culling. So if I do that, it's going to show me the parts of the hair that are not back faces, and the back faces are going to disappear completely. So if I do that with only one of my meshes, you can see that there is just hair missing, right? It's not that it's missing, but I am looking at the back faces. If I turn and look around, I can see it just fine. But from this angle, they are not visible. So that's why I need a copy that flips the back faces. So now if I remove the first one, you can see that I can see some of this hair, but if I turn around, right, the back faces disappear from the other side. So if I want all the back faces to be visible, and I want to make sure that all of the parts of the hair are visible in the game, for this particular mesh, I need to have both. So the same goes for the other parts of the hair, right? Like it has a specific section that is only visible from this angle. If I put the other one, now both parts of that hair are visible. But if you want to, if you have a hair like this, or even a gear like this, when you're working with clothes, you can, if you can confirm that they are back faces copies, like I just did, you can just get rid of one of the copies, and then later we can add them again. So this is what it's going to look like in solid mode. So I'm going to keep working on the material preview mode. And I will worry about the back faces later. If your hair doesn't have back faces like this, probably because it's a vanilla hair, then you don't have to worry about any of that. But anyway, so we are going to bring our face and our ears back. And now we're actually going to start moving things around. So you're going to select everything, holding down Shift and selecting all of your meshes. And then you're going to hit G, and immediately after, without moving anything, you will also hit Z, which will let you move everything on an axis. So we're going to move the hair on this axis until it's sitting in a nice place, both above the scalp and under the ears. That seems okay for now, so I'm going to click to drop it there. And let's get a little closer and see what it looks like. I think that I did a pretty decent job with this because the ears are sitting at a height. Well, it's sitting under the ears at a height that kind of like looks almost perfect. There is some space between it, but I can fix that in a moment. Now we're going to do two different methods of uh, uh, doing this with hair. The first one, the lattice method, is not something that you will always need. It's something that for this particular hair, I probably don't even need myself. But I'm going to show it because if you have a very elaborated hair, or if it's just the face that you're porting to is very, very different from the original, it's going to require a lot of editing, then you probably want to use the lattice method. So the way that we do that is we're going to go to here in object mode, and remember that there are two modes. You should know this if you have looked into your Blender basics. There's the object mode and the edit mode. Remember that you can only do specific things on each of these modes. So be very careful. If you are trying to do something and it's not working, you probably need to change the mode that you're on. So we're going to first, in object mode, add a lattice. I'm going to move back so you can look at it. So the lattice basically is going to be a net that moves, that extends around the hair that I want. So with G, select and G, I'm going to move it around and I'm going to encase my hair. If your hair, here I am also encasing the ears and it's not really necessary. So I am going to just with S, click and S, scale it down and make sure that it's all around the actual hair. Now, clicking on the lattice, I'm going to go to the lattice properties or the object data properties. And if you go here, you're going to see the resolution U, V, and W, which tells you how many lines the cube has. So we want to increase the number. I usually increase it around 8 or 10. Um, you can do it just individually if you want. So I put them on 8, 8, and 8. Or you can also click and drag to copy it like that. But this is what I want. I want the cube to become a bit of a net, and that is what I'm going to use to work. Now, here in the mesh, I can go and click each of them. This, the main hair, the secondary hair, and my particular accessories. And to each of them, I'm going to assign a modifier. The modifier properties are here with the little wrench. So you go and click the wrench, and then you already have one modifier that you should never touch. You always have to have one modifier for the end root that you are working with. Do not touch, do not move. Um, and you're going to add the modifier here and do the lattice modifier. Once you do that, you can move the lattice up, usually because the order of the modifiers is important in Blender, especially when you want to apply them at the end. So we're going to put it on the very top. And here you can see that the lattice, it's red right now because we have not selected any lattice in particular. The program is expecting that I might have several lattices put down at any given time, so I need to tell them specifically what lattice, which here in object I can just click and select the only option that I have right now in my file, which is the one that I placed down. So I can do that. I can do the same thing for all of them. Again, add lattice modifier in the modifier properties, then select in the object lattice. One more time, I select here. I do the lattice modifier and I move it up and select object, lattice. So now all three of my meshes that I'm using are have the lattice assigned, which means that whenever I start moving the lattice, everything else is going to move with it. Please make sure again that this symbol over here is white. If it's red, it means you have not selected a lattice and nothing is going to work. So once you have done this, now you can click on the lattice and go into edit mode. Now in edit mode, we have little vertices over each of the corners here of the net. So what I do is I can select one of the specific vertices that I want. I clicked on it and I click G. Well, I tap G and I can move things around. Or I can also like get on a specific angle. Like you can see that here the bangs are going through the forehead. So I can get in one specific angle and do a click and drag select And once you do that, you can move all of the parts of the hair that are aligned with these vertices. So if I hit G, I can just pull this carefully, and now it's a lot easier to manipulate. I'm going to do the same thing of click and drag and move this section as well. Uh, it looks like this side is not adjusted as much as I needed, so I'm going to pull only one vertex. And like going here into my ears, I do have a bit of separation here and a little too much of merging on this side. So I'm going to pull down this part of the hair. That looks a lot better. And then I'm going to pull up this other part, maybe move it a little bit to the side so it aligns with the parting of the hair a little better, and it kind of hides with the braid. Um, and basically, you can do, again, this is not really necessary for this particular hair that I am using. The lattice is one method that you can use, and it's very helpful when you have a lot of hair, when the differences of or the fitting of the hair is going to be a lot of work because it's all over the place compared to the face that you had it installed in before. But this one barely requires any changes anymore. And the little details that maybe I can be like, I want to mess around with that. It's not going to be easy to do with the lattice modifier. So make sure that you finish all of the big important changes with the lattice. And once you finish, you can go to the zero point 0 um, mesh that you're working with. Um, not, sorry, not in edit mode, but in object mode. You go to the object mode, you go and select the zero point 0. And then here in this is a little menu that you have for the lattice. At the end, you have an arrow that points down, which is a drop down, and you're going to hit apply. This is because right now the changes that we have made with the lattice are not permanent yet. If you delete the lattice right now, all of the changes that you made are going to go away. So you want to make sure that before we get rid of the lattice, we're going to apply all the changes that we made. If you do this with gear, you might also need to get rid of some shape keys, but thankfully hair usually doesn't have shape keys and you don't need to worry about that. If your hair has shape keys, you need to get rid of them in order to use the modifier, or well, to apply the modifier itself. So I already applied everything. That means that I can get rid of my lattice. And now it comes the part where I can look into the little details. For this, we're going to use probably the most useful tool when it comes to porting, upscaling, and any of the sort, which is the proportional editing. It's oh, I'm getting some interesting noise on my side. Hopefully, you're not catching that. Um, so the proportional editing is going to be this little circle over here. Right now it's gray because it's not activated. So I want to activate it first. And then I can click, I would recommend that you click on every single part of your hair, not only one, every single part of your hair, and go into edit mode again. So first, it's all going to be selected, which we don't necessarily need. So you can just click away. And now it's time for you to find where the hair is and where you want to move it. So I want to fool around with this sideburns over here because I'm not sure how much of it is going through the face and how much is showing correctly. So I'm going to click on one single vertex. Then I'm going to hit G, And that is letting me access the proportional editing right now. However, the circle that I use as a point of reference for how much I am selecting is extremely big right now, and it's not even visible because of how close I am to my mesh. If I try to move anything right now, um, oh, actually, I had already previously made this smaller, but usually on the default, when you first try to use this, it's going to show, oh, look, this thing deselected. So be careful with that. I select it again in edit mode. Then I click on my vertex, I hit G, and if I want to move my hair, it's going to move all of it. So that's not what I want. I hit X. Well, I hit escape. Um, you can see that actually, if you scroll all the way back and you hit G again, you can see the circle. So that circle is so big right now that I cannot see it when I am working up close with the face. So in order to make it small, we just hit G and we scroll with we use the scroll wheel of the mouse to scroll, 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 scroll until it's the size that is visible here. So now I can decide to move, how much I move it. I can scroll while I move. It's extremely helpful to use. I now I can see how much of these sideburn is really against the face. So it's not too bad. I can just leave it there for now. And this is where I can make all of my little edits. Here, if I want to pull the hair down a little bit because I don't want the ear hole to be as visible, if the hair is still going through the forehead, or maybe when I look at it from this side, I can see that there's a lot of space, so I rather like pull it back a little bit so it's closer to the forehead and it looks a little more natural. Um, this, as you can see, is pretty much already finished. I don't need to make any more changes, but like small adjustments can help. Like maybe here I want the hair for the ears to be more visible. So I'm going to make my circle really small, see how much of it I have left, make it maybe a little bit bigger. Here it doesn't like uh, it's not going through it anymore, so it looks better. I think that the shape maybe doesn't look completely normal now that I am adjusting to the ear, so I can adjust the shape a bit by clicking one vertex here at the end, making this a little my circle a little bigger, so it's like, okay, I need to find the scalp. Here's the scalp. Okay, so a little higher like this. That should, yeah, that should work. I can see that there is a little more of this hair poking out, so I can push it a little to into the head. I think that looks a lot nicer. Now, you can do this for quite a while. This might take like from 5 to 20, 30 minutes depending how complicated the hair that you're doing. If you're porting anything to Hrothgar, it might take you a while, for example. But if you are just doing it like this, you should pretty much be finished with with this tool alone. You don't need to do anything else. I One recommendation that I have is that when you have hair that is, for example, very long like this, or it has especially hair that drapes kind of like over the shoulders, it's not a bad idea to go into text tools and export a torso. um, this is like you can go here and you go to small clothes and it's going to show you the bodies that you have. So here I have a vanilla body, but you can easily just like install a body that you want, especially if it's a very specifically shaped body, like Jab or like uh, type X for men, you might want to like actually bring the torso into Textuals and export it. I already have one. Well, actually, I have a few of the torsos that I have brought before. So let me bring one very quickly in the small clothes body. So I'm going to use this one. Okay. So the same thing that we have done before, if you don't want to look at the semi-transparent parts of the body, you can just go into material properties and change it with alpha clip. And here I can compare like, all right, so where exactly is the hair falling? Is it going through the chest or is it going through the neck? In this case, it looks pretty good. I don't think I really need to do anything. Perhaps you might be like, well, but it's like floating, like it's not like right against the body. You probably don't want it right against the body because it's going to have a lot of clipping. That is one of the main reasons that Square Enix doesn't give us hair that is very long because they are like, oh, it's going to clip a lot. So it's better to have like a little bit of room between the body and the hair so it doesn't go through it as it animates. Maybe if I wanted, I can also like bring this particular hair down a little. Oh, look, I accidentally selected only one of the meshes, so I need to be careful with that. I hit X and I select everything again. I go into edit mode and now I can move this down completely. I think maybe this being a little longer looks nicer, and that means that I also need to adjust this a little bit. I think that looks pretty good. All right. So uh, once you have finished doing this, and once you are happy with how your hair looks, it is time to export it into Textiles. So there are a few things that we need to do in preparation. First, you need to choose where you want to import the hair. So usually, if you are going to port from, let's say, female Midlander to female Aura, there you are not going to have a lot of issues. And my recommendation would be like, if the hair is installed in a specific hair, try to install it there ideally. Hair skeletons can be very strange with Final Fantasy. Trying to export a skeleton is never going to give you good results. So my recommendation is try to export into a hair that already looks like a hair that is already shaped like the one that you are installing. So, for example, for if imagine that this were female aura instead, and this hair is installed in Midlander. Uh, this is right now installed in Midlander 172. So the 172 hair is the less hair. That means that this hair probably has the bones that I need in order for the body to, for the hair to animate. So if I am very new to all of this and I don't want to experience any issues with weights, I should probably go to the female or 172 and installed my hair there. However, this is going to vary with certain races. Female Viera has very few bones. It doesn't have all of the bones that all of the other female characters have. So if you are installing to female Viera and you have long hair, you might have to install it with you might have to install it with the special hair, like I think number 3 or something like that. You need to look up which are the hairs for Viera that are compatible with the bones that most females have. Another problem is if you are porting from female to male, or, well, specifically, yes, female to male, males don't have as many bones as females, period. So for this, I would recommend that you find a hair that would require like additional fooling around that I would cover in a different video for weights. But keep that in mind that um, doing this with a hair um, that doesn't have the right bones, it means that it's not going to animate right. So I might make a little space for that at the end of this video. If you want to make sure that your hair moves, you can like, um, well, do that with me at the very end. But right now I'm going to focus just on bringing it into textiles, right? That's what we're going to focus on right now. So this hair I want to install for the Viera male, and I usually, as I said, I want to make sure that I install things with a hair that is more or less similar in shape, because that makes it so that I am either it's the same hair that the original has, or it's a hair that has a similar shape. So for the Viera male, and actually, for most hairs that I import that are long, I try to go for the hair 162, which is the great lengths. This one is usually friendly when it comes to importing hair. However, again, we have like to make a parenthesis there for the female to male conversion, which we will get into later. But if I want to import this hair and I want to make sure that it looks right, first I should change the textures. So in this particular case, because I am using a hair that is for all races, not it's not Viera exclusive, all of my textures are not going to be found here. If I am in model 162 and I move to textures, it's going to take me to number 1 directly. As opposed to if I am working with a hair that is for Viera only, which is number 4, if I go to textures, it's going to show me the textures for number 4. So if you are using one of the hairs that are available for all races, you need to go to the Midlander files. The model is still going to be for Viera, but the texture files are coming directly from the Midlander bases. So that means that I have to go to Midlander Male, and at Midlander Male, I go to 162 textures. These are the textures that my hair is using at the moment. But we're going to first steal the textures from the Midlander female. Again, going to the 172, that's where my hair is installed. And as I had seen previously, right in the models, I already know what my textures look like. I know that this is one of the materials, and this is another of the materials. So ideally, this is going to be A, and this is going to be B, right? So if I go to textures for 172, I can see that actually this material in particular is hair B, usually because they don't want to mess up the hair that was installed here previously, which for the females, it's the Liz hair. But in this case, they install it as hair B, and this is hair C. So I can confirm these are my two textures. So I can just, instead of doing things one by one texture by texture, I'm going to steal the whole material, which is both the normal and the multi. So here, by selecting my hair B, that might be also actually A for you, you can go into more options, edit material, and then you copy the material. This is copying all of the information that we have here. Then I am going to go back to where I am installing my textures, which in this case is going to be again the Midlander 162 hair. And this one only has one texture at the moment, so I can just replace it. I can go into more options, edit material, and then I paste it. Now keep in mind, if you are going to use a Mikote hair, I would recommend that instead of installing it in A, maybe you leave um, leave the texture alone, leave the A alone, and instead open more options and add a new material. This is because usually um, the main file that you have here already includes the material for the ears, so you might want to save it if you are reporting to Mikote and you want the vanilla ears. But if not, you can just replace the A with this one, and it doesn't matter if you get rid of the original textures altogether. Now you will see that the hair is completely messed up because these are not the right textures for this hair, but that's completely normal. I need to go back again to the Midlander female, and in 172 I'm going to grab the next material. It might be hair C like this, or it might be hair B. If you have, I'm going to copy it here again. You can see that it's set as standard. It's not set as hair because this material is for an accessory. So keep that in mind. If the hair that you're copying is, well, sorry, the material that you're copying is part of an accessory and not the hair, make sure that that is set as a standard. You copy it and then you go to where you are installing your textures. 162 Midlander male. And you open here more options and you add a new material. So here I'm going to paste the material, and thankfully it already changed to standard, so I don't have to make any changes, and I save it. So now I have my material for the hair, my material for the accessory. You should remember which one is A and which one is B. Now it's time to install our hair. So in this case, I am going to do make sure that I have finished everything that I want to do. And now remember that my particular hair has back faces in some sections. So if I want to make sure that everything has its right back faces now, I'm going to select each of the meshes one by one. First, I'm going to do 0.0, and I'm going to hit in object mode, not in edit mode. I'm going to do Shift and D, which immediately duplicates the hair that I have. And I'm going to hit Enter because I don't want it to move. If I immediately started like moving around my mouse, it was going to move everything. So you hit Shift D and then Enter immediately, and now I can see that I have a copy here for the hair. So this one, I'm going to make sure that is 0.1, right? 0.0 followed by 0.1. And I just need to flip it now. So in order to flip the back faces, you flip the normals. So I click my copy. I go into edit mode, sorry. In edit mode, I select everything with A. I go into mesh. I go into normals and I do flip. So this is not going to be visible right here in this mode. Remember that if you want to really look at if you have the correct back faces, you have to be in solid mode and you have to have the back faces culling option. And you have to double check, like, all right, so I can see this hair from this side. If I make it invisible and I do the other one, okay, that side is invisible in the copy. So if I go the other way, it's going to be the same. I cannot see the back faces for this one, but if I unhide the hair, I can see the hair. All right, so that means my two sides of the back faces are working just fine. Remember, this is not necessary if your hair didn't have back faces to begin with, and if you didn't have exact copies of the hair at the beginning. This is only for hair that has been ported from other games or has been made from scratch. All right, so I do the same. Shift D, enter to duplicate. I'm going to make sure that my numbers stay very well organized. 0.3 for this copy. And again, I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to select all of it. I'm going to go into mesh, normals, flip. And one more time in object mode, I'm going to enable my little butterflies, my accessories, and I'm going to do Shift D, then enter. I'm going to make sure that it's a number I can see and recognize easily, 1.1. Select it, edit mode, A, and then in mesh, we do normals and we do flip. You might not need to do any of this. Again, this is very particular for hair that needs to have back faces. Now, after this, I have already finished all my hair and how it's established. If you're going to fool around more with this, like if you're going to make it head compatible, or if you are going to try to do any type of like if you're going to do Mikote ears with the vanilla hair and stuff, I would recommend that you name things as well. Like for example, if I wanted to say like, okay, so this is the main hair, but I have the identical versions. So this is the version 1, so I'm going to hit it as A, and the other one is also the main hair, but is the other flipped back faces. So that one is B. So if you see, I changed the name, but I didn't change these numbers. So if you're going to change anything just so you can find it a little bit easier in the attributes section or anything like that, make sure that you are actually, um, you know, um, selecting, well, renaming this particular section and not touching the numbers. The numbers are or have to be always visible for text tools. So here I can name like these are the butterflies and oh, butterflies A, because again I have two identical ones, so I want to know that they are separated. Butterflies B, and this one I want to name it extra volume A, and um, the other one extra volume B. You don't need to do this, but I find it that if you're going to do more stuff with your hair later, like trying compatibility or anything like that, you probably want to know what things are in general. If you have a lot of meshes also, it's not a bad idea to do this from the start, like when you want once you port it, because it's going to be a lot easier to edit everything that you need. So with that out of the way, we are going to go to the hair. Here, we're going to click the one that is named with the Y. We're going to do right click, and we're going to do select hierarchy, not delete, select. So this will only work on object mode. Keep that in mind. Now that you have selected everything, we can export it, going to File, Export, and FBX. So if you go to File and Export and FBX, you just need to find a good way, a good place for you to bring it, put it in a place that you can access a little bit easier. I had already made an attempt on this hair earlier, so I'm going to just rename that. Um, and these are the settings that you need in order to export things from text tools. Usually it's limit to selected objects because as you see, like I have the ears and the face and the top, so I don't want all of that. I only want the hair. So only selected objects. And then I'm going to get rid of some additional checks here. I don't want baked animation. I remove that. In armature, I do not want to add leaf bones. Absolutely not. And in geometry, I remove apply modifiers, but instead I can use triangulate faces. This is not something that you have to do, but if you start messing around with the hair, if you like cut something or copy and paste things and you made any significant changes, it's going to need to get its faces triangulated. If you don't do that, Textiles is going to throw a super big error and it's going to have like, well, it's just going to tell you to try again later. So make sure that you have triangulate faces just to avoid that. And now you can export it. Now, when we go into text tools and we hit import, we will go to the file that we just exported, but we are not going to immediately hit export because we need to assign the materials. So you select it, then you do open editor. This one is going to take a little bit because my hair is very big. It has a lot of polygons, so it's going to say calculating tangents and it's going to take a bit. And now you can see that here you have your 0.x material and your 1.x material. And it's separated here by the parts of the names that you gave it, right? So first things first, I'm going to go into my zero material group and I'm going to make sure that I have the right material selected. It could be A, it could be B, depending on if you left the A for the Mikota ears, maybe yours is going to be the material that you need is B. But for me, I installed everything in A and then added group B for the second material. So 0 is going to correspond to A, and then number 1 root node is going to correspond to B. That's the most important thing. Now, if I go here to the main hair, you can see that I have some attributes here for scalp and excess detail and other things. I am not sure what excess detail usually does, but I don't actually need it. It's just using the same attributes that the vanilla hair had. So I definitely don't want the scalp attribute. Uh, and I here also for the main hair, my hair is so big that if I do the sculpt attribute, it's all going to disappear under a hat. So my hair right now is not hat compatible. That's its own video. So I recommend that if you want to make it hat compatible, you keep it in mind for a next step for another time. Right now, we're just going to export it and make sure that it works. So I removed all my attributes because I don't want hair disappearing or anything like that. And now I hit import. Now, if you assign the correct materials, your hair should be there, visible, beautiful, and perfect. If it's broken in any way, if you see that there are some weird lines or it seems to be like some parts are missing, that's just because you didn't select the correct textures. That might require some troubleshooting. If you have issues with that, you can open a post in the help section and we can help you find where the materials that you need really are. But ideally, this is it. You already did it and it works and it's perfect. Now, this is where this class is going to end because it's a lot to cover, and depending on your level of Blender knowledge, this might have like completely melted your brain in effort and you just want a break. So I'm going to end the class here, and the next class is going to focus on how to make sure that your hair has the right skeleton. However, if you want to experiment, you can just finish your mod over here, going to mods, going to create mod pack, standard mod pack, and then you're just going to go and select the hair that you want. So for me, it was my hair section for Viera male, and I selected the 162, right? So I selected, select item, all files, confirm, confirm, final review, and then I get to name it. This hair, by the way, is Kiwi Formas Simple for March 2023. So I am naming it Kiwi Simple for male Vera. And I just, instead of advanced mod pack, I set it to basic mod pack. And I create it, and that's it. Um, with this, you should be able to use it in Penumbra. And ideally, if the stars have aligned, if your hair is, your skeleton's hair is compatible with the hair that you decided to install it on, that should be it. Like you have a hair that works and there's no more to do. Congratulations. You have made your first board. Uh, it's very likely that you might need to go back to Blender and continue editing things. Like once you test it, you're like, oh, actually, this hair is kind of like going through the shoulder, and this part of the scalp is too visible. So I am going to go back to Blender. I'm going to do my edits. And the only thing that you need to do now is import it again without the editor anymore. You can just import it directly and keep trying and keep repeating it. It's a thing of trial and error for sure. Now, if you want the hair compatibility thing, I'm going to link a video for that specifically. And if you want to, if you imported your hair and in theory it looks nice, but you're like, oh, my hair doesn't move, we can cover that in the next class. I'll put together some files and resources for that. But if everything works, you should have at least a hair that in screenshots looks pretty, even if maybe it doesn't have the bones that you needed to have. So next class, we're going to cover that, skeletons and probably weights if necessary. And it's not going to be anything too advanced, like just the basics of porting, of course, and also looking into how to bring the Mikota ears with your hair. So hopefully that all of this information was useful to you. Remember that if you're having any issues, you can just make a help post and we can help you figure it out. But ideally, you learned something new. And remember that I am not an expert. This is just the way that I do things. So if you find your own workflow, that is also completely fine. You might have your own tactics that work better for you, especially if you already have some experience with Blender. There is not one correct way to do everything. This is just the way that I do it and that I find it very easy. So ideally, it has helped you as well. Thank you very much for watching and for being part of the Discord. Hopefully, we will have more classes for you in the coming days. Please take care.